that night, very early morning, as they're out fishing. But then we have to ask this question, why include this detail of 153? Why include that? What does that mean? Is there any significance to that? And the answer, of course, is yes. Is there anything from the Old Testament that we could connect that to? And the answer, of course, is yes. So today, we'll do a bit of an introduction to this number, 153, and find out, we read 153 and we don't know what to do with that. That's just a random number, but it's not a random number. And John knows that, and many of the people reading John's letter in the first century would know it, so he's going to include that detail. Many of his Jewish audiences would know that that's not a normal number, and they would know the place in the Old Testament that you find where John is pointing you to. And that part in the Old Testament, oh, by the way, has to do with fishermen. So this is going to be an introduction. We'll talk a little bit this morning about this number 153. It takes some thinking about and reflecting on, so it's not something that, and if you're not a math person, I apologize, but it's not always something that just jumps right out. You have to think through and maybe do a little reading on your own of why these numbers were important. So 153 is part of a sequence of numbers. And maybe you know somebody who, prime numbers are a sequence of numbers. And maybe you've met someone in your lifetime. They're always pointing out prime numbers. They love to do that because they know the sequence. So they love to show you how they know the sequence of prime numbers. So 153 is inside of a sequence of numbers that are called triangular. So a triangular number sequence, and I'll try to explain this. I'm going to show you two different ways. There's a number of ways you can, if you read about it, you'll see they have formulas to do the calculation, but I'll at least show you what they're doing with it and how you come up with these numbers. But it's a sequence of numbers, and the higher the sequence goes, the larger the distance between each triangular number. And so that means that they're not very often. So triangular numbers stand out. One way I can help depict it, or that's often explained, is with an equilateral triangle. So on your sheet under number 8, you'll see that I have an equilateral triangle. Equilateral. Every side of the triangle is equal in length. So that's one way, and I'll talk through that in a second. That's one way you depict it. The second way is with a formula, just doing the math. So let's say we said we have the number 4. I use number 4 because this is more of a sacred number. Number 4, and you say, well, what's the triangle of 4? Well, you can do the math. 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. So 4 plus 3 is 7, plus 2 is 9, plus 1 equals 10. And so your solution is 10 is the triangle of 4. And you're like, what the heck are we talking about? Well, let me show you. At least I'll try to graphically depict this. If you want to make an equilateral triangle with 4 units on the edge of each side of the triangle, so it's equal 4, 4, 4, what you're going to end up with is 10 units on the inside. It looks like this. So here's number 4 is, we're looking for the number 4, and 10 is the triangle of 4. So you'd say here's 1 inside the triangle, 2, 1 plus 2, plus 3, plus 4. So each side of the triangle now has 4 dots. And if we add all of those up, well, okay, first of all, this side is equal to this side is equal to the bottom. If you add all the dots, you get 10 dots. So it's a way of depicting a triangle. The triangle of 4 is 10. Then you'd say, well, wait a minute, what about the triangle of 5? What do we want to do with 5? Well, you add the next layer underneath the triangle, and you add 5 dots so that you keep an equilateral triangle. So the triangle number of 5 is 15. All right, that's just introduction to triangle. You might have to read some more about that. But here's the key. The number 17, so if you said, what's the triangle of number 17? The answer is 153. Boom. So if you're an ancient reader, and many of the ancient religions paid attention to numbers. The Hebrew Bible, you can pay attention to numbers. That's what we'll talk more in depth next week. There's a whole way of studying the Bible that the rabbis connect words by what's called gematria, and it's numbers. So the fact that 17 and 153 are connected, that's important to remember. And by the way, the reason I showed you is the number 4 and the number 10. This was a sacred number to a group of people called the Pythagoreans. Now, Pythagoreans were like a cult, a mystery cult, started by a guy named Pythagoras, and we all learned the Pythagorean theorem when we were in school. One of the fundamental things about in math that you learn. So in the cult in many of these cults that used numbers, 4 and 10 were sacred because 10 is a number of completion, and that's in the Bible too. We have 10 commandments. So this became a symbol for something that was complete, and it was a sacred number. Now let me show you one more. This is not on your sheet, but I just want to show you there's another triangle number that you're all familiar with. So if you said, what's the triangle of 36? And the answer is 666. So 666, in the Bible, we read it and we have all these associations with the devil and the evil that comes along with that number. But that's a triangle number. So it's a number that stands out. But there's even something bigger about this number. Not only is 666 the triangle of 36, but 36 itself is a triangle number. It's the triangle of 8. And so now you get like a double whammy. It's like an even more significant number because you go from 8 to 36, and 36 then is a triangle number, and then the triangle of 36 is 666. So anyways, you get this, it's like exponential. That's why there's significance to that. Well, that's part of the reason why that would be a significant number. And then I want to show you one last piece, because in the mystical sides of both Judaism and mystical Christianity, you get a symbol like this triangle with 10 spots in it. And what they do is they use the name of God, Yud-He, Vav-He. So I found this t-shirt. You can buy this t-shirt on Amazon. So notice the equilateral triangle, and inside that triangle is the name of God, a Yud, a He, a Vav, and a He. So you have the Yud at the top, He, Vav, and He going down the side. Then on the bottom, you have Yud, He, Vav, He on the bottom. So even within mystical Christianity and mystical Judaism, you get an equilateral triangle with 10, something having to do with 10, and in this case, they put the name of God. So this goes beyond what our normal thinking is. My point is, people in the first century did a lot with numbers, and we don't often recognize that. So you get to something like this, and you say, well, what's the big deal with 153? Well, if you're a numbers person, you're like, aha, he's something there, because that's a number that stands out to me. It's not just a random, why did John include that detail? It carries symbolism that's deeper than most of us would think. There's a good article by a scholar named Richard Bachman. He goes into a lot of the mathematical things that John is doing that all center around these triangle numbers. In fact, the number, it's not coming to mind. The book, Luke does this too. Luke tells us in the book of Acts, chapter 27, Paul's on a boat going to Rome, and then he just randomly inserts, there were 200 and some people on the boat. And you think, now why did he just give us that little detail about how many people were on the boat? Well, that number is a triangle number. So again, it stands out. Okay, this is where it's going to connect. Because just like everything in the Gospels, there's often a deeper, layered meaning, and it's always pointing to something in the Old Testament. And in this case, what scholars have long noted was that this is probably pointing to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 47, and this is what we're going to look at next week. How is John connecting this to Ezekiel 47 And then what do we understand to be the greater message? It's not spoken explicitly, but what's the implicit message coming out of Ezekiel and post-resurrection 153 fish? So Ezekiel 47, and you don't have to turn there now. We'll be looking at it in detail next week, so this is a little bit of an introduction. But Ezekiel 47 has a vision of the new Jerusalem to come. And part of his vision is that there's going to be a well of living water, a river of life that's going to flow out from underneath the Temple Mount, or underneath the temple in Jerusalem. And of course, that's a metaphor for the Spirit being poured out over all of the earth. And this river flows from Jerusalem and it goes down either side of the mountains. And when it goes down the side of the mountains towards the Dead Sea, then what you end up getting is the Dead Sea fills with fresh water. So as the Spirit goes down into the Dead Sea, according to the Ezekiel vision, suddenly the Dead Sea is freshwater sea. And so in Ezekiel 47, verse 10, and again, we'll look at this in detail next week. Verse 10 starts, notice, fishermen will stand along the shore. Well, what's the story in John 21? Well, he's got fishermen. So there's fishermen involved. Fishermen will stand along the shore. This is the shore of the Dead Sea. From Ein Gedi, so Ein Gedi is a spring, the spring of Gedi, to Ein Eglaim. Now, this is what we're going to really look at in detail next week. Those two words, Gedi and Eglaim. Then it says, there will be places for spreading nets. Well, what do we have in the story of John 21? You have fishermen and nets. And then the fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, here's the key, and this is exactly where scholars will point us. You have this word, Gedi, Ein Gedi. It's the spring of Gedi. Many of you have been there when you go to Israel. And Ein Eglaim. Nobody's been to Ein Eglaim because we don't know where it is. So it's from Ein Gedi to Ein Eglaim. So what? What's the big deal? Well, in Hebrew, and we'll talk again about this next week, in Hebrew, every Hebrew letter is not only a letter, but it's a number. So you can associate Aleph equals 1, Bet equals 2, Gimel, like Gedi, equals 4. No, 3, sorry. I had to sing my Hebrew alphabet song in my head. Okay. So if we take the word Gedi and you add up the Hebrew letters, you get the number 17. Now we just talked about number 17, right? Because what is number 17 associated with? It's associated with the triangle of 17 is 153. If you add up the Hebrew letters in the word Eglaim, guess what number you get? 153. So those two words are connected. We don't know where Eglaim is. In a land that relies entirely off of springs, they don't know where Eglaim is. So you've got this word in Hebrew that equals 153. So those two words are connected, at least mathematically. And if you think, well, that's just coincidence, what's even crazier is that if you start in the Hebrew Bible, where the section of Ezekiel 47 begins, where the chapter begins, Gedi is the 153rd word in the paragraph, or in the chapter. So it not only happens that 153 is the triangle of 17, but the word Gedi is the 153rd word in the chapter. So it starts to get really strange as Ezekiel is putting together his Bible to tell us something. 17 and 153. There's fishermen. In the day the Messiah comes, the Spirit will flow out of the temple, and there will be fishermen fishing. And then you get the number 153, and you think, well, wait a minute, what's the message that John's trying to tell us? And if we go back to that, and you think, part of the message, at least, is this. The river of life that comes out of the temple during the age of the Messiah is here. The Messiah has come, and that's exactly what happened. He died and resurrected, and now you get this miraculous story of fish that includes the number 153. It's happening. The Spirit is being poured out. Everything that was happening in Ezekiel is now showing up here in John. Now, again, that was really fast. We're going to go over all of this again next week in more detail, but at least it gives you an introduction that number 153 is not simply a large number. It's got a connection deep using numbers, which the Bible does. There's no doubt about that because God speaks to the culture, and if the culture uses numbers, then he speaks numbers to communicate messages, or he uses numbers to communicate messages. Okay, so that's our little introduction. Let me do a quick review. I forgot to change the word preview to review.